therefore, of prodigality cannot be very much conjoined. For it is not easy for him who receives nothing to give to every one, since the property of those private individuals rapidly fails, who also appear to be prodigals. For a man of this description does seem to be better, though not much, than the illiberal man ; for he is easily cured by age, and by want, and may arrive at the medium. For he has the properties of the liberal man, since he gives and does not receive, yet neither as he ought nor in a becoming manner. If, therefore, he should happen to be accustomed to this, or in some other way should be changed, he would become liberal ; for he would give to those to whom it is proper, and would not receive whence it is not proper. Hence the prodigal does not appear to be depraved in his manners ; for it is not the property of a bad or ignoble, but of a stupid man, to exceed in giving and not receiving. But he who is prodigal after this manner appears to be much better than the illiberal man, for the above mentioned reasons, and also because the one benefits many, but the other no one, and not even himself. The multitude of prodigals, however, as we have said, receive whence they ought not, and according to this are illiberal ; but they become prompt to receive, because through being willing to spend, they are unable to do this with facility, for the means of spending rapidly fail them. Hence they are compelled to procure money elsewhere. But at the same time, because they pay no attention to the beautiful in conduct, they receive negligently, and from every one indiscriminately. For they desire to give, but it is of no consequence to them how, or whence they give. On this account, neither are their gifts liberal, for they are not beautiful, nor for the sake of this very thing the beautiful in conduct, nor are they bestowed as they ought to be, but sometimes they cause those to be rich who ought to be poor, and give nothing to men whose manners are moderate, but bestow much on flatterers, or those who are the means of procuring them any other pleasures. Hence, also, most of them are intemperate ; for they spend their money easily, and likewise spend profusely on things of an intemperate nature, and because they do not live with a view to the beautiful in conduct, they incline to pleasures. The prodigal, therefore, unless he is corrected, falls into these vices ; but by care and diligence he may arrive at the medium, and to what is becoming in conduct. Illiberality, however, is incurable. For old age and every infirmity appear to render men illiberal, and it is more congenial to them than prodigality. For the multitude are more desirous of gain, than disposed to give. Illiberality, likewise, extends widely and is multiform, since there appears to be many modes of it. For consisting in two things, a deficiency in giving, and excess in receiving, it is not wholly and entirely present with all illiberal men, but sometimes it is divided, and some indeed exceed in receiving, but others are deficient in giving. For all those to whom such appellations apply, as niggardly, tenacious, and sordid, are deficient in giving, but they do not desire the property of others, nor do they wish to receive, some, indeed, through a certain probity, and an avoidance of base conduct. For some of them seem to take care of their own property, or at least say that they do so, in order that they may not at any time be compelled to do any thing base. Of these characters, however, the skinflint, and every one of the like kind, is so denominated from giving to no one in excess. But others of these abstain from property which is not their own, through fear, because it is not easy for him who takes what belongs to others to preserve his own property unviolated. Hence, they are disposed neither to receive nor give. Others, again, exceed in receiving, in consequence of receiving on all sides and every thing, such as those who perform illiberal works, together with panders, usurers, gamesters, sharpers, and other depredators, and those who for the sake of a little subject themselves to great infamy. For all these receive whence they ought not, and what they ought not. The acquisition, however, of base gain appears to be common to these ; for all of them endure disgrace for the sake of gain, and this small. For we do not call those illiberal, who receive great things whence they ought not, and such as they ought not, as for instance tyrants, the subverters of cities, and the plunderers of temples, but we rather call him depraved, and impious, and unjust. The gamester, indeed, the highwayman, and the sharper, are among the number of illiberal characters, for they are addicted to base gain, since for the sake of gain they devote themselves to these employments, and endure disgraces, and some indeed expose themselves to the greatest dangers for the sake of what they may get, but others gain something from their friends to whom they ought to give. Both these, therefore, since they wish to enrich themselves, whence they ought not, are addicted to base gain, and all such receivings are illiberal. Reasonably, also, is illiberality said to be contrary to liberality, for it is a greater evil than prodigality, and men err more in this than in prodigality, of which we have spoken above. And thus much concerning liberality and the opposite vices. CHAPTER 2. It would seem to follow that we should in the next place discuss magnificence, for it also appears to be a certain virtue which is conversant with riches. It does not, however, in the same manner as liberality, extend to all pecuniary actions, but only to those that are sumptuous. For in these it surpasses liberality in magnitude, for, as its name signifies, it is a becoming costliness in great things. Magnitude, however, is a relative, for the same expense does not become the commander of a three-ranked galley, and the president of a public spectacle. The becoming, therefore, subsists with reference to him who spends, and to the things on which he spends his money, and the money which is spent. He, however, who spends with decorum in small or in moderate things, is not called magnificent, such as, quote, "To vagrant mendicants I oft have given," close quote. But he who spends appropriately in great things, for the magnificent is a liberal man. But the liberal man is not, because liberal, magnificent. Of a habit, however, of this kind, the deficiency indeed is called parsimony, but the excess, vulgar ostentation, and ignorance of what is elegant, and such other appellations as belong to habits which do not exceed in magnitude about things in which great expense is becoming, but exhibit a splendid profusion in things in which such profusion is not proper. Concerning these, however, we shall speak hereafter. But the magnificent resembles the scientific man, for he is able to survey what is decorous and can spend largely with elegance. For, as we said in the beginning, habit is defined by energies, and by those things of which it is the habit. But the expenses of the magnificent man are great and becoming, and such also are his deeds. For thus the expenses will be great, and adapted to the deed. Hence it is necessary that the deed should be worthy the expense, and the expense worthy the deed, or even surpassing it. The magnificent man, therefore, spends after this manner for the sake of the beautiful in conduct. For this is common to the virtues. And he also spends with pleasure, and largely, because an accurate attention to expense is the province of a parsimonious man. The magnificent man, likewise, will rather consider how he may accomplish the most beautiful and becoming work, than the money it will cost, and how it may be accomplished with the least expense. It is necessary, therefore, that the magnificent should also be a liberal man. For the liberal man spends what he ought, and as he ought. But in these things, whatever is great pertains to the magnificent man. Magnificence being, as it were, a certain magnitude of liberality. Since, however, liberality is conversant with the same things as magnificence, the magnificent man will produce a more magnificent work from an equal expense. For there is not the same virtue of possession and a work, since the virtue of a possession is to be of great worth, and most precious, as gold. But the virtue of a work is to be great and beautiful. For the survey of a thing of this kind is admirable, but the magnificent is admirable, and the virtue of a work is magnificence in magnitude. Among expenses, however, which we call honourable, are such as pertain to the worship of the gods, gifts dedicated to divinity, the building of temples and sacrifices, and in a similar manner such things as pertain to every demoniacal nature, and such as are bestowed on the community at large from a laudable ambition. Thus the expenses of the magnificent man will be of this kind, if he should think